This is Hannibal from thehannibaltv.com, and joining me today we have none other than Dusty Wolf, also known as Dale Wolf, who you guys will probably remember from his numerous appearances in WWE and WCW over the years. And what a lot of you might not know is, well, he was in WWE as Zeus, aka Tiny Lister, talked about in my interview with Zeus. Dusty was actually in charge of taking care of Zeus behind the scenes when they were both working in WWE together. So we're going to get into that. But how are you doing these days, sir? I haven't heard from you for a lot of years now.
I'm doing well. When I retired back in 09, 10, I had one or two matches in 10. And then, but anyway, when I fulfilled those last couple commitments, I walked away. I walked away. I was done. I was mentally burned out, physically burned out. I had already started teaching at college, so I'd already at least set myself up on a path, and everything there has worked out well. And I've got a new son, 7 years old since then, so that keeps me busy. And the grandkids, and I'm just enjoying life outside of wrestling. As I said, I'm one of those that when I quit, I quit. So,
Where do you live now?
I'm in San Antonio. I haven't left San Antonio since I was like 11 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So in fact, I'm on the same street. I live on the same street. I'm gonna date myself now because I just told you I've been here since I was 11. 47 years I've been living on the side. No, I'm a hometown boy. I'm not going. I travel the world, but always come home.
Very good. Well, I'm going to get into a bit of your career after if we have time, but I know you really wanted to clarify some things about Zeus because I think Bruce Pritchard also, he's known to spin some tales, and he's also said some stuff about your relationship with Zeus in his No Holds Barred podcast. So I'll let you just get into it, your meetings with Zeus, who approached you about being a handler and so forth.
Well, it started, I get a phone call, I want to say like early April, right after WrestleMania '89. Terry Garvin calls me, and he asked me if I'd be interested in doing what we've described, making all the towns with Tiny and making sure the rental cars are ready and getting him to and from the buildings and that sort of thing, because he had no clue. Anyway, he had no reason to have a clue of how the road worked. And when they made me the offer, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to get a per diem for taking care of him, getting him around, driving the car, and whenever I work, I get paid for that too. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I'd be crazy not to. So we were in every town Hogan was in. In other words, he followed Hogan because of the movie. And we were in every town from, I want to say, the last week of April until sometime between SummerSlam and Survivor, somewhere in September, early October. Then we went, as far as getting Tiny around, we went into just the TVs and the pay-per-views and so forth. And then we were together on all those dates until the new year, 90. And that was what it was. I was to make sure that Tiny showed up and was able to get to the building and find the building and things like that. Rent cars and things like that people don't understand. They've never been in the business. That to us it's routine, but it can be a headache if you've never really done it. And like I say, we were on the road every day for a good 6 months. And then once we got going into Survivor, then they backed his schedule off to just the TVs, and I still made towns along the way, but I wasn't full time. I was never full time events except that time period. I mean, I had periods where I made a ton of towns, and I had other times where I thought they lost my number. But that was it. And we would make, like, the schedule you heard about, 11 days on, 3 days off, 4 days. And he would show up. And in the beginning, all he was doing was almost like brother love shows. In fact, some of them were brother love shows in the live house events. And then worked his way into the ring, all to promote that movie. Yep.
Well, how was he attitude-wise, being a movie star, and because he was in, of course, a lot more than No Holds Barred.
Yeah.
Maybe you could share some of the stuff he was in, because I've said it, but he was a pretty big star.
He was a bigger star than you would think. I mean, he was in some TV shows. I used to give him a hard time about doing the job for Matlock. He was in the Christian Bale Batman movie, all the Friday stuff. He was the president of the world, and I forget the name of the movie, but the Fifth Element or something like that. What else was he in? Lord, he was in quite a few things. I saw him in something not too long ago. Like I said, we lost him here earlier this month. I saw him in something not more than a couple months ago. I forget what it was, but yeah, he did quite a few things besides No Holds Barred. As far as when he first came to work for Vince, he was very quiet. I came to find out it was because he was nervous and in a new world. He didn't know anything about it. That didn't quite. Well, some of the guys didn't like that. That he came in and he didn't go through locker room etiquette and shake hands and say hello and all that stuff. He just came in and went to his little space and that sort of thing. That was the kind of stuff that he and I dealt with often, because we'd be in those cars and I would tell him, well, you shake hands whenever you see someone, you say hello to people, just little things like that. I had crosswords with him one time in all that time. Otherwise, my time with him, as far as running up and down the road with him, was great. It really was. He was a fun guy. He had a good sense of humor. And
the one thing that you wanted to clear up was that apparently he didn't want to get in blue cars because he didn't want to get in red because
he could not. Yes. It's funny now. I was ready to just strangle him then. We fly into Albany, New York. I'll never forget where we were at or anything, because it was just one of those days. The story is much longer than anything anybody's ever told. There's quite a few parts to this story. First of all, we're running a little bit late, and it wasn't our fault. The flights were delayed getting into Albany. Once we land in Albany, we've still got the 2.5 hours, whatever it is, to drive to Glens Falls, New York for the TV that evening. We had a system that if we were running late, that he would get our bags, I would get the car, be at the curb, and we would just take off. All the boys would do something like that. One would be responsible for all the luggage, and the other one would go get the car. So anyway, I'm hurrying. I go get the car, and he had a thing that he wanted to ride in Lincoln Town Cars. That's the only car he wanted to ride in. And I would make that reservation. It needs to be a Lincoln, or my man's not going to get in the car with me to begin with. So I pull up in this bright red, brand new, probably had 50 miles on it, Lincoln Continental. And he stood on the curb and just looked me dead in the eye. I'm not getting in that car. It's Lincoln. It's a town car. What's the problem? I'm not getting in that car. It's red. And I just stunned. And what makes it worse is that he's doing this. Kurt Hennig, Marty, and I want to say Sean. Sean may not have been there, but I know Kurt Hennig and Marty were standing there loading their car, doing the same thing we had just done. And they're looking at me, and they're looking at Tiny. We're all like, you're not getting in this red car. Nope. Not getting in this red car. If any of my people see me, I'll be dead. And I lost it. I'm like, Tiny, we're in Albany, New York. I don't think anybody from LA is going to see you driving upstate New York, not getting in the car. He literally was refusing to he wouldn't even get off the curb. even think about it. So, Kurt and Marty give me the good luck. We'll see you at the building. I'm like, thank you. And I go change the car, and the girl at the car counter, she's like, was there a problem with the car? And I said, it's red. And she's like, what? And I'm like, don't ask. And she trades the car out. We get in the car, and I'm driving down this little side road out of the Albany airport that takes you to the highway. And as we are going, this little old lady, there's an intersection, the little lady just runs the stop sign, and I wipe out. I tear the whole front end out of that new car. We spent nearly an hour with the police because they kept trying to blame me for the wreck, and I just knew I was going to jail because I was refusing to sign the papers, etc. While we're sitting there, Jim Duggan drives up. You guys okay? Everybody all right? Yeah. Will you tell the office that this is what's going on? I've got to get another car. Sure, no problem. So the owner of the rent-a-car place, he pulls up while we've got all these police around us and lights, and it looks like the circus has hit town, and it's over a fender bender. He says, guys, as soon as you get done, just come see me. Okay. So we get in the wrecker. We ride in the wrecker to wherever his lot was off the airport. We get a new car, and there's a twist to this part. Get a new car. We get to the town. We get to the building there in Glens Falls, and as we walk in, Bruce Pritchard and Bobby Heenan, they bum rush us at the back door. Are you guys okay? Are you all right? Are you sure you're okay? Yeah, we're okay. It was more of a fender bender than anything. Bobby takes me by the arm, and he starts to walk over this direction, towards the left with me. And Bruce is telling Zeus, well, go get your bag and go talk to Pat or Vince or whoever he's supposed to talk to that night. And Bobby's like, all right, Hennig told me he wouldn't get in a red car. And I'm like, Kurt told you right. He wouldn't get in a red car. And then we delayed, and that's when we had the wreck and all that other. He's like, you're kidding. And no, I said, the only thing I got out of Tiny about the entire situation was that he didn't belong to a gang. But where he grew up, you could be affiliated with a gang, and you had to be friendly with others and that sort of thing. You had to tolerate the situation, I guess is the way it comes out. And he just couldn't be in the red car. And Bobby says the same thing to me that I said, Tiny, how far are we from LA to begin with? And so it all calms down that night. And the best part about at that point was the car they gave us in order to get to Glens Falls was maroon. And I didn't even say anything. I just to see if he's going to get in the car, and he did. We took off. I didn't even say a word about it being, but it was maroon. So that was like a Tuesday when we do the big, multi-hour tapings. And the following Monday, what was the show on USA that Gorilla and Bobby would do? The
All American.
All American. Yeah. I'm watching that with my oldest son, who at the time is 5 or 6. And we are watching this, and this out of the blue, Bobby starts plugging the movie. And he starts talking about, he tells Gorilla, I pulled up to pick up my good friend Zeus in my red limo. And before they could cut the commercial on that intro, my phone's ringing. And it's Tiny. He's like, you told him? I said, the entire office knows. Telephone, telegraph, telewrestler. Everybody knows. And so that's where the legend of the red car comes from. But Tiny swears that he was not actually a gang member, but because of his neighborhood, you couldn't even look like you might be affiliated with another gang. And I'm like, but we're in upstate New York. He didn't care. Did not matter.
I see. Yeah, not a lot of gangs, at least probably in those days in upstate New York.
I asked him on the way. Yeah, I asked him on the way back to Albany because we were staying in Albany, and I said, how many Crips, how many Bloods are going to be in upstate New York? and Compton in the same week. In the same, how, when, where, and I think it didn't matter. It was the fact that he was not going to ride in that red car.
How were his workouts? Was he still working out on the road?
Yeah, that was part of the routine. Unless we just had such a bad travel day, that was part of the routine. He would, if I wasn't ready in the lobby, whenever he was ready, my phone was ringing in my room. Are you ready? And I will be in a couple minutes. And that was part of it. He knew all the gyms because he would get one of the boys, Savage or somebody, to tell him where the gym was, and that's where we'd hit it every day.
A lot of people will try and do that revisionist history and make it seem like he wasn't over, but he headlined numerous pay-per-views. And I know as a kid, I was petrified of him. And I know a lot of people really looked at him as a great heel, even though he might not have been as skilled in the ring as
just to give you an idea of how over he was at one time during that 6-8 months, whatever it was, 10 months, about 8 months. Not only did he headline these pay-per-views with Hogan, the office added that pay-per-view in December of that year in order to get more pay-per-view money out of the run with Zeus. You remember that?
Yeah, the steel cage match with him and Savage against Brutus and Hogan.
Yes, just added it. That was extra. In those days, you had the 4. You only had the 4 big ones, and that's it. And they just added that one because he was that over. As I said, when he was going into the towns, he would do nothing but just cut the promos. And some of the promos, he didn't even talk. He just did the hard, hit himself, and let, whether it was DiBiase or whether it was Pritchard or whoever, let them do the talking. And he was worth enough money to them that they were sending him to all these towns. They renewed his deal. I know this for a fact because he told me, I'm going in to because the movie had just been released, and the idea was to get to SummerSlam, but then the movie was number 1 for a week or two. But he was getting over on the TV, and he was getting over in the towns. And so they, can we draw this out with you? What is your schedule like? And he told me he never discussed money with me, but he told me I went from my deal ending at SummerSlam to my deal ending at Survivor. Signed a whole new deal. Then he signed a 3rd deal in order to get that last pay-per-view out of something. So he actually had renewals that he would have never received them if he wasn't over, if he wasn't making some money. And a little known fact, the office offered him a job to go on the road. Like I said, I never discussed money with him, but Pat came in. We were playing cards one day, and this was one of the last shows he was on. And Pat said, "I want to make a proposal to you." And I'm going to go. I'm going to go. It's none of my business. And Pat's like, "No. You can explain some of this too." And Pat sat down with him and offered him, and he didn't offer him any money in front of him. And none of that was discussed. But it was the same thing that all the other boys had. You work full-time schedule. We'll discuss a nightly guarantee if you want to do this, and put you on the road. And obviously he didn't, and I don't blame him. But yeah, he was offered a full-time deal.
He's also said in the past that it was originally supposed to be him versus Hogan at WrestleMania 6, but there was a money issue, and maybe it also had to do with he didn't want to go on the road. But do you recall any of that at that time?
Yeah, I remember talk about it. I don't know WrestleMania numbers, but I know they wanted to keep him on the road and get him into WrestleMania. I do know that. That was part of the offer of let's get you full time, let's get you on the road, work with you, improve your skills a little bit. But he didn't need it. And like I said, I know that for a fact because, as I said, I was leaving. You guys, it's your business. And Pat's like, no, because we're just going to discuss the road and stuff. And okay. So he had a full-time offer.
How did he get along with Savage when he was doing the tag team deal and appearances with Savage and Sherry?
They got along pretty well. Uh, Savage was a smart man when it came to business. Savage was not one of those that was going to resent the guy from outside coming in. Savage saw the opportunity, and then especially realized what the potential was there when it just keeps rolling. And so Randy and Zeus got along real well. You know, they would sit and talk, and Randy would give him advice and all that kind of stuff. So Randy was a smart man. Let's put it that way. There were those that weren't quite that smart, and he had to go through some of that too.
Who would have been some of the guys that resented the Hollywood guy coming in and, in their view, taking their spot, but in reality, actually helping the business?
Right, exactly. He's actually making everybody a little bit of money. I know Dynamite did. Kurt, of all people, did in the beginning, and that was more because Tiny was so standoffish, and that was because he was nervous around it. It wasn't because he was arrogant. But Kurt was hard on him in the beginning. Dynamite was just miserable with everybody. Those were probably the two worst.
Did Kurt ever try to rib him, or was he still high? Oh,
yeah. Kurt pulled a rib, and that's when Tiny finally decided to not just ask me about locker room etiquette and whatever, but actually start doing it. I don't even know if Hustler Magazine still exists, but in those days, everybody under 40 knew about Hustler Magazine, right? And one of the articles every month was, Asshole of the Month. And Kurt had to have bought at least 6-8 copies. And he took and tore the Asshole of the Month page out and then cut out Zeus's head of the promo pictures, taped it on that. And then these are in catering, this Asshole of the Month page is in catering, and it's in the locker room, and it's right as you come in the door in the building. I forget which town it was in, but it was a TV. So everybody in the audience got to see it. And that was the one that Tiny finally said, these guys are getting to me. And I'm like, that's my boy. I keep telling you, you're going to have to open up a little bit, even if you do your own thing after. But just saying hello and just shaking hands, that will change some of these attitudes. And it did, but it took that rib to get him to do it.
It looks like your boy is going to sneak up and put the sleeper on you.
He does that to me when I'm teaching class, too. He'll come in and he'll wave at my students, and then he'll take off. He doesn't know shame. He doesn't care.
Now, I'm sure when you were a lower card talent, you didn't have much interaction with Hogan, but when you were taking care of Zeus, I bet you were around him a lot. How did he treat you?
Hogan, I hear all the stories, and I'm sure at least part of them are true, because you don't become one of the biggest names in the history of the business and you don't play the politics and so forth. But as far as I go, he always treated me great. Of course, I was no threat either. If anything, I was helping him make money. He was going to make money anyway without me, but I was helping in that moment. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, because if there was no one taking care of Zeus, he could have taken off like Mr. T supposedly did a bunch of times.
There's no telling where he would have gone a couple times. There's really not. Or he'd have been late because I loved Tiny to death before we got done with everything. But he would get on the phone and I'd have to go beat on his door sometimes. We got to go. And it was all because he calling home, talking to the girlfriend, talking to that girl, or talking to mom, or talking to his brother, or whatever. And he would just lose track of time. And more than once, he had phone bills that were like our mortgages for one day. Because in those days, you didn't have cell phones. It was all through the front desk. So.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I even experienced a few of those phone bills back in the day. And they used to be crazy. It wasn't like
unbelievable.
And how was kayfabe with him? Was he told by the office you got to keep kayfabe, or would he sign autographs and stuff if fans approached him?
It depended on where he was at. Let's be honest. Just be completely straight up. Uh, when we if we were in a restaurant or whatever, he was always great with like the servers and the cooks and that sort of thing. Depending on how a fan approached him, was completely dependent on how he reacted. Uh, in the gyms, he was same thing. The people that worked at the gyms, he was friendly with them, take photos with them, sign autographs, etc., etc. Other people working out, it was all how they approached him. Quite honestly, every bit of it was how they approached him.
I see. And is there anything about him that people would be surprised at that you experienced during your time with him?
Surprised, he was really smarter than a lot of people would ever give him credit for. He really was. And like the eye, people always want to make fun about the eye. The eye was because of some childhood disease. I forget exactly which one he told me, but it was like, one of the chicken pox or measles or something like that. And that's what the eye was about. It wasn't something birth defect or anything like that. So I mean, that might surprise a few folks. He was just the fact that he was so smart as he was. He was intelligent. Even if he doesn't come across it in some of his interviews or whatever, you sit in a car with somebody for 2 and 3 and 4 hours at a time. You've done it. And this is the only person you're talking to for hours at a time. You get a sense of where they're coming from and what they are. And he was really smart. He really was.
Whose idea was it to put a unibrow on him?
That I don't know. That I don't know. He hated the Z on the head too. He hated that. But he was making more money than most of us, and so he tolerated the Z on the side of his head. That had to have something to do with the movie. Oh, whoever wrote the script, whoever put the characters together, that's all it could have been.
Did you ever work with him in the ring?
As far as in front of a crowd, no. Because the only time he ever worked in the ring for in Vince's office was those pay-per-views that you saw. Teaching him that match. When I say that match, it was a match. Hogan and Savage had what they wanted to do. Beefcake was there too. And so everybody went to Tampa like twice. And the old Eddie Graham Sportatorium there in Tampa still had the ring. Mike Graham still had the building. And I was more the tackling dummy, obviously. I was the one taking the bumps or taking the moves so he could see what Hogan wanted, what Savage wanted. That's the extent of having actually been in the ring with him. But I was a culprit in that. But he, like I said, he only worked those 5 matches with Vince. And then he went a couple of times in Puerto Rico and a little bit in WCW. But the time I was with him, the only time he worked was those pay-per-views.
I seem to recall there may have been a few incidents with enhancement talent where he did that move to various wrestlers, but I don't know if they were actual matches.
I don't remember either, now that you mention it. It wasn't me, so it could have been. It could have done something where he came out or got somebody backstage. I don't remember. I really don't. They weren't actual matches. That was one thing that, regardless of what the office today wants to call what they're producing and what they're doing, they still rely on wrestling and wrestling mentalities and angles. And one of those that makes a lot of money is you don't expose the monster too much. And they certainly did do that with Zeus.
And I understand you were actually on the set of No Holds Barred itself, taking care of them there. How was that experience?
No, the movie had been finished by then. I don't know exactly when the movie finished. Like I said, I started with him at the last week of April of '89, and the movie was being post-production. It was being prepared to come out in, was it June that year? July?
Yeah, it was in the summer, I seem to recall. What did you think of the movie itself? I mean, it's got to be one of the top wrestling movies of all time.
It is on that account. It is what it is. It was a movie to help get Hogan over and a movie to help get wrestling over. And it did what it was supposed to do. It also came out in the summer against Michael Keaton's Batman, which just annihilated everything that in the theaters in that summer. The movie made money, so it tells you that people watched it. I don't know that it made money before it went to video, but it certainly made money because I remember being told that, hey, we're in the green now, and that was before he was done. So
There's a fan on here asking why he never got a title shot against Hogan. It seems like even if he didn't win, a one-on-one match against Hogan probably would have been worth doing a pay-per-view for.
that was what the idea of the whole WrestleMania thing was, from what I understood, is he let him go through a few more people and kind of like bring it back around again, where the only guy that can stop him is Hogan, sort of thing. That. I don't know that for a fact, but that was just the way things were being discussed when they were talking about, well, we want to get to the next WrestleMania, we want to put him on the road, etc. So why did he not get one before then? It didn't need it.
How were the crowds when he was on house shows? Were they pretty full? I know in general the house show business was a lot better in those days.
Well, we were also in the Hogan towns too. It made no sense to have Zeus elsewhere. And I'm not going to say we were in every Hogan town, because there were times where we would be in the B town. But the vast majority of the towns, we were in the Hogan town. So that way he could do the thing where he calls Hogan out and people know Hogan's in the building and that sort of thing. So, yeah, the houses were business in that office didn't start to fall off until, 90 into 91, 89. It was still really, really solid. It was, I wouldn't say every night's sold out like all the old timers do, but there were a lot. There were a lot of nights that were sold out.
Would you have to still work your regular matches on those nights where you were driving Zeus around? Because I know sometimes you probably have to wrestle 3 or 4 times a night.
On TV, I did. In the house shows, there were some nights where I just didn't do anything but drive and fly in and make sure he was in the ring with Brother Love or Teddy or whoever he's supposed to be in the ring with, and that's it. But I was probably in the ring 70% of those nights. And just like anybody else, 10, 15-minute match and get out of there.
Yeah. You've got a lot of fan questions on here for you.
Okay.
Somebody wants to know your thoughts on working with Bad News Brown and his passing.
I liked the man. I never wrestled him. For no other reason I liked him is he was straightforward, and you knew what he thought, and I always appreciated that out of the guys because there was so many of them that weren't that way. I was a little shocked. I mean, I shouldn't be shocked that we're losing so many of the guys like we are, because I have to sit back and realize how old I am. But you hear the name, and you have your last memories of him, so that shocks you a little bit. But he was a good man to me. I wasn't around him a lot. He stuck to himself.
Matt, one of the great members of this channel, wants to know if you have any good world-class championship wrestling stories.
Oh, such as, there's a lot of things that happened in that place in the 80s. Man, it's hard to say because somebody was always screwing up. That was a place where I didn't live in Dallas. I didn't have a reason to live in Dallas. So I wasn't around for a lot of the extracurricular stuff. I think the fact that the Mike Von Erich whole situation there, that was, to this day, it's sad. They didn't have any idea where he was at. In fact, I was his last scheduled opponent there in the Sportatorium the Friday in that time period when they found him. And everybody's like, well, Mike's not here. I remember that. And then I worked the Saturday night, wherever that was at, whatever little town we were in. I came home Sunday, and then Monday I had to be back in Fort Worth. And when I went to Fort Worth, that's when everybody was saying, well, they found him dead and so on and so forth. So that was strange. That was just one of those things that you just don't expect, anything like that.
Someone's asking, who were the most gracious people backstage in WWE?
Oh, that's a good question. The most great? Tito, Ricky Martel. Those two are off the top of my head. Bill Eadie, just gracious gentleman types. Bad news. I would have never thought of him until somebody brought him up a minute ago. He was pretty much a gentleman. And thank you and how are you and so forth. Those are the guys off the top of my head that were like the ones that even today I haven't seen them in years, and I would still tell you they were just tremendous people as far as the way they treated others.
John Stewart wants to know your thoughts on working with Tugboat.
Oh, I knew Fred from the moment he started the business, and by the time he got up to Vince, he wasn't dangerous. But when he was like here in San Antonio, when he was breaking in, and he was doing things like stepping on your hands or breaking your fingers, or stepping in Jose Lothario's mouth and breaking his teeth out of his head, or clotheslining you so hard you woke up on a bench in the locker room. He was dangerous when he started, but he was one of the nicest guys in the world. He just didn't know that he didn't know he was that strong. And he was ungodly strong. Sweetheart of a guy. But just
apparently very clumsy too, as we saw Master.
Yeah, well, that's an indication. Like I say, he stepped in Jose Lothario's mouth one night and broke teeth out of his head. He stepped on my hand one night and broke 3 fingers. He was clumsy. But you couldn't stay mad at him. He was one of those guys that just he was so easygoing and liked everybody, and you just couldn't stay mad at him, even if you, like I say, you wake up on a bench 5 minutes after the match was over.
Wasn't he Dusty Rhodes' brother-in-law or something like that?
Yeah, at one time.
I guess you must have been a big Dusty Rhodes fan to be called Dusty Wolf, or was that just random?
No, Dusty's, well, my mom nicknamed me that years ago. I mean, I was a little kid, and it's stuck ever since. I had to change my name twice, once in Florida and once with Vince. And I'm like, it's not my legal name, but it's the name I've been known as since I was like, 10 years old.
I didn't actually put 2 and 2 together that Dusty Wolf and Dale Wolf were the same person until we started talking, because I remembered you more as Dale Wolf for some reason.
That's me. It started in Florida. The first time it happens in Florida. I go in, Eddie Graham says, you can't use Dusty. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to argue. I'm in Florida. I got a shot. I'm going to argue. And then I had been in New York at that time, part-time and in and out. I was working regularly at times. Like 2.5 years when Dusty came in. And Patterson comes over and says, well, we're going to have to change your name. And I'm like, here we go again. Just call me by my middle name. And that's when I changed to Dale.
Harris Black, watching on our Facebook page at the Hannibal TV, wants to know who is the stiffest 80s WWE wrestler. Were you ever injured? And he also wants to know your favorite tag team partner.
Stiffest into that Warrior. Warrior. So you're going through the list, and then the Warrior. A lot of the guys really weren't. I mean, they weren't. You couldn't be overly stiff and work 25 nights a month. Couldn't do it. Favorite tag partner of all time would have been Kenny Timms. In the WWF, it was fun teaming with guys like Barry or somebody that was just a little further up the card than you. But the guys would, they would work with you a little bit. What was the other question? It was who was the stiffest, which was
Did anyone ever injure you, like out of stiffness? Did something with floppy?
Well, not badly. The Beverly Brothers, I thought they had broke my shoulder one night with a belly to back by not taking care of me. And it turns out it was just bruised. But other than that, nothing major with Vince, in Vince's office. I didn't have the knee injuries and that sort of thing. All those came in other places, other times.
I've seen a couple of clips of the Beverly Brothers being sloppy with enhancement talents, actually.
They didn't care.
And for the Ultimate Warrior, he's a very popular subject on my channel. Could you discuss working with him and any backstage interactions with him that you may have had?
Well, I knew him from Dallas before he ever went to New York, and again, he's another one of those guys that I wasn't a competition to him, so we got along because there was no tension. There was no I might be trying to take that spot, so to speak, or whatever. Working with him was rough. There's just no two ways about it. He was just stiff. That's all there was to it. But he was stiff with everybody. I mean, it wasn't like he was just like a dynamite. Dynamite would be stiff for some people, and others he'd work just as easy as could be. Warrior was just stiff. That's all it was to it. As far as I never had any of the issues others had with him. But again, I wasn't in that spot where I'm a threat to him. And a lot of the hate Warrior gets with people is wrestling was a business to him. It was make as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and go home. Which, if you want to be right down and honest about it, that's as smart as it gets.
And as far as like when you're having a match with Warrior, I know it's a lot different in the 80s than it is now, where literally every punch, every kick is scripted for TV wrestling. Would you go into the ring and it would be like called on the fly with Warrior, or would he have to tap you?
I knew the finish, that was it. Otherwise, especially like a Warrior, I'm not going to get much offense. It's just not happening. So it was just sell. And if he was really stiff that night, I'd make sure there was a little space between us so I could get that, 10 seconds or whatever before he sputted me again. But TV, in those days, we would talk out a little bit before we went out if there was something needed to get over or an idea that needed to get over. Otherwise, it was just, we called it as we went. That's all we do.
And you mentioned Dynamite Kid was very rough on some. We've seen that he broke Mick Foley's jaw when Foley was an enhancement guy, teaming with Les Thornton. But as you mentioned, him and Les were buddies, so he treated Les very well in that.
Different.
What was your experiences with Dynamite?
I stayed as far away from him as I could. He was just a bad human being. There's no two ways about it. We can say anything else we want about him. You can talk about his work or anything like that. He was just a bad human being. Like I say, he would be miserable on guys like Tiny, even after Tiny's making an effort. He would still just be a prick. He just was. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but that's not speaking ill of the dead. I was just telling the truth. He was not a good man to put up with.
Were you back there when that incident happened with Jacques Rougeau?
I walked up right after it happened. When I walked up, there was blood everywhere, and people are, they're freaking out. Oh my God, they're all flustered. And I got the whole story then, but I missed it by like about 4 minutes.
Now in the backstage environment, there's really not that much bullying, at least not that much physical bullying. There's probably still cliques. I mean, I'm not back there. But how was the environment back then when you had like some serious bullies like Dynamite Kid that was literally making people fearful of him?
Like me, I stayed away from him. I wouldn't give him any opportunities, which in some ways that's not a good work environment. But he was one of the few. The ribs are one thing. Like the one when I talked about the Hustler magazine and Kurt and Tiny, that's that's over a line a little bit, but that's not physically harming someone or destroying their property and things like that, which Dynamite would do. There wasn't as much of that going on as legend would have you believe. It's just that we know about the times that it did. And as I say, Dynamite he didn't care about anybody. He didn't care. It was just, he was one of the few, though. He really was. There weren't really too many guys, because even guys that weren't necessarily the best person of the group, they just didn't have social skills, so to speak. We're all in this together at some point. Even a guy like me that's opening match and a guy up here that's working with Hogan, we're all in this together, because if we're not working together at some level, it all falls apart. And they understood that even better than I did.
McKeeboy Productions wants to know your thoughts on today's wrestling.
I don't watch it. I don't watch it. When I got out, when I retired, I watched a little bit in those days, and as it got further away from anything I recognized, I just lost even more interest. Um, what little bit I do see, whether it's a clip or we flip around and we watch for a few minutes and so forth, I see some tremendous athletes. I see guys doing things that I could have never dreamed of doing, I mean, much less wanted to do. I mean, they are some great athletes. But there's just absolutely spontaneity may not be the right word. Creativity. There's no real in the ring creativity, which that takes away from the product. It does.
Yeah, great athletes. They can do great backflips and all this crap. But as far as believability and mystique, it's pretty much all gone.
Mystique is a good word.
I agree that enhancement talent helped wrestling, but Randy Savage coming at us from the grave wants to know your thoughts on the system back then.
Of course they did. Of course they did. Part of what you have as a problem today, from what little bit I see, is you don't have guys that when you turn TV on, you know they're not going to lose. You know they're going to get their hand raised, and then you have guys over here the same thing, to where then you can, even though the house show business is dead right now because of COVID, even before that they weren't building towards those house shows like used to be, which is, or even pay per view. They've gotten so busy trying to give top level, and I understand why. I really do. I completely understand why. But yeah, the enhancement talent, without that enhancement talent, who would have been a star in those days? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no, it definitely helped. And it also got the finishing moves over really well.
Exactly. And in fact, that's again, it goes back to who would have been a star if there wasn't somebody to make the star. And as you say, the finishing moves. Now I can get it to where, like when Jake would do the finger, everybody knew what was coming. Down here in Texas, when Fritz would do this, everybody knew what was coming. Or Kerry, you knew what was coming. Exactly.
Somebody on here says your kid is a star in the making.
He may be. He may be.
Bon Louis says, which road agent did you deal with the most?
I tried to deal with George Steele as much as I could. I admired George. Whatever else anybody else might say about him, I admired him. He was one of the smartest men I ever met. Didn't always have that choice. So sometimes Tony Gurria was a good man to work with as far as I was concerned. I tried to stay away from the chief as much as possible. But sometimes you didn't have a choice. You showed up, those were your two agents, and that's who you dealt with.
Now, I did some enhancement matches in the early 2000s, and it started off as $400 a night. Then it went down to $250. I guess they cut back on pay. What was it around when you were working? Was it based on the house? Or
no,
was
I had a guarantee of $250 a night, no matter whether it was TV, house show. I had guaranteed $250 a night.
That's not. Was there any type of contract, because you were used on the house shows?
I never signed a contract with Vince once. I signed one piece of paper the entire time I was there 6 years, in and out. And I signed one piece of paper, and that was because the British government required all of us to register with them somehow through the office, and then the office listed us, paperwork, bureaucracy. And I signed something for the office going on that trip, and that's the only time I ever signed anything my entire time there, except my paycheck.
Well, that says a lot if they flew you over to Britain to work rather than just use a local from there.
Well, there was one situation to where they had the tour set, and I wasn't on the tour. I'm not going to tell anybody any different. I wasn't. It was like the first time they went to Europe, '89, and the British government says, you can have these matches in England, but you're not going to do it without some local talent on the shows. So what Vince does is he says, okay, we'll book the local talent, and then he brings underneath guys like me, and Al Perez was there at the time, a couple others like us, Lombardi, and puts us over the local talent. And so that was the whole gist of me going to England for Vince. And that's not how much I had anything. I'm not, people think, well, no, that's not possible. Yeah, I made one phone call from LAX to the office, talked to Terry Garvin, and I was booked. And then it was just whether it was Terry or JJ or on some case, for a few occasions, Pat, one of their secretaries, I would just do everything over the phone or when I see them in the building. That was it.
Tony wants to know if you've ever worked with Jumping Jeff Farmer.
I've heard the name, but no, I've never made that one. There's quite a few I've worked with, but I never got not that one.
John Flower wants to know, what did you think of Lombardi being given the Brooklyn Brawler gimmick and a push? Of course, he was just Steve Lombardi before that.
As far as the talent goes, why not? Who knows what's going to catch on? With 30 years hindsight, you realize a guy like Steve, a guy like me, by doing all those jobs, we were painted as nothing more than an underneath guy for the rest of our lives. That's how strong that TV was. So push it, whether it was Steve, whether it was Barry, whether it had been me, Reno Riggins, it doesn't matter. The guys like that had done those jobs so much. Pushing them later, I think it was doomed. No matter how hard we would have worked, how hard Steve worked, whatever. But from a booking standpoint of let's see what catches on, why not?
Mike is asking, how is working with the Nasty Boys? How were they backstage?
What you see is what you get. Just it. They are the Nasty Boys, 24/7. I don't have anything to add to it. It's just, if you've paid attention to the what they do in the ring, what they do in the promos, etc., you know who the Nasty Boys are.
A few people have asked your thoughts on Marty Jannetty, who's one of our popular interview guests on this channel.
I love Marty. I hate seeing some of the things the last 10, 15 years. I've known Marty since he started the business. He came to Kansas City, and he took my place in Kansas City. And then a year later, he was going to Ghana, and I took his place again in Kansas. So, we've crossed paths for, we're going on 40 years now. I love him. But some of the things that have happened and he's let happen, and I just shake my head, and I'm like, please, somebody help him.
I did hear he had his first ankle surgery recently, but he's going to require a follow-up, so hopefully that's a step in the right direction.
I hope so, too.
Jefferson E. White wants to know, who was a better talent, in your opinion, Frankie Williams or Jose Rivera?
Oh, Jose by far.
As far as someone's asking here, do you think we should have seen Zeus with Hercules?
I like the idea when we're looking back. I think the idea is great. It wouldn't have fit because by then Herc was already on his way down a little bit. And Zeus was programmed for one specific person. And had they put him on the road like we talked about a little bit ago and had him go around and beat people, it might have worked. Who knows? Let's just say it. I like the idea. I never thought of it. I like the idea.
Zan wants to know your thoughts on Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Bobby was hilarious, and he didn't even have to try. He was another one of those fellows that if you didn't want the answer, don't ask the question. And I love that about guys in the business, especially with so many of them that won't tell you what they think or will slice your throat the moment you turn around. He never had that problem with Bobby. And like I said, he was always just funny. And in just conversations, not even telling jokes, just observations and the way he would explain whatever had just happened. That sort of thing. He was great to be around. It was just fun.
Someone's asking if you've ever seen Grunt the Wrestling Movie, another one of those classic wrestling films.
No, if I do, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't think I've ever seen it. I've heard of it, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
Mr. Nice Guy wants to know when you started doing the doink gimmick. I'm not sure if you ever took it over or not, but you were definitely one of them.
I started doing it regularly in South Africa. I did it a few times along the way. Just walk out of the curtain and go back because they needed the clown everywhere you looked at Vince. I never worked it for Vince. I just wrote in South Africa, can you do it? And I went, well, I guess. So I did.
What did you think about that whole doink thing? They kind of let it go a little bit long at the end there.
It did. It did. I mean, I'm not going to complain. I was making a little bit of money off of it elsewhere, but as far as from what I can remember at that point in time, they were grasping for straws too. They were anything and everything to try to make some money before Austin and the rest of them started hitting in all cylinders later.
Ivan Santos wants to know any pay issue stories from WWC Puerto Rico.
I didn't until my last time there. I was there 3 different times, and my last time there, they held me up over my anniversary pay. And so I had a big blow up in the dressing room with Joe Vica over my anniversary pay. And I went home at night. It was like 11 o'clock when we got out of the building, and I was on a plane like at 4:30 in the morning. I wasn't sticking around. But before that, I didn't have any issues. I mean, my first time in Puerto Rico, we were making a little bit of change. We were getting our weekly guarantees, and that was it. But I never, until anniversary, I never had a late payday. I know other guys did, but for whatever reason, they didn't short me until then. And then it was like, I'm done.
I certainly had them, but by the time I was there, the business was further down than when you were there. But anniversary, for those who don't know, that's like the WrestleMania of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, they take 2 or 3 weeks off and don't run anything between like the last show and then the anniversary shows. And so, I came home for 2 or 3 weeks, went back home, did anniversary, and they went, well, we'll pay you the next week like we always do. You're a week behind. All right. So I made the next week, and then Jovica goes to hand me like $200 when he owes me my anniversary paydays. And we had a big stink. I didn't take it. I didn't end up with any more money either. But I mean, I didn't just sit there and take it and say, okay, pay me next week. And I got on the plane, like I said, about 4:30, 5 o'clock that morning, and came home.
Steve wants to know if you witnessed anything unusual with Macho Man and Elizabeth backstage.
Well, I don't know that it was normal to be locking her in the rooms. But I mean, that's common knowledge by now. But as far as anything kinky or whatever, no. Nothing. He was very possessive. There's no 2 ways about that.
Someone wants to know your opinion of Iron Mike Sharp.
I thought he was great. He belonged in another time period. And that's not a knock on him. He was like the perfect heel for 1975. But he was still a great hand. I thought he was great. He knocked the shit out of you if he hit you that form. I remember that every time I worked with him. I knew it was coming.
Were you there for that Billy Jack Haynes fight that he had with backstage?
No, I was there when he got locked in Boston Gardens, but I wasn't there for the Billy Jack thing.
Oh, was that due to his washing himself over and over again?
Yes, the compulsive whatever he had about germs and cleanliness, etc. He took such a long shower, he got locked in the building in the Boston Gardens, and they had to call security or maintenance or somebody to come get him out of the building.
The funniest story I heard about him was apparently at his wrestling school, he would oil himself up and get in his full ring gear to train people.
It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't, because he was, as I say, he was a compulsive, and things had to be certain ways, and that wouldn't shock me at all. I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't see Mike after he left, but nothing about that would shock me.
TJ Rush, one of our members here, says he wrestled you at a county fair in Kansas when you were playing the Doink character. He was green back then, but he says you were very easy to work with. I don't know if you remember that match or not.
Yeah, I do. They blend together. I mean, I probably had 4,000 matches over my career. So there are nights it's just a blend. Yeah, I don't, but I do. I remember us being there. And as far as easy to work, that was my whole theory of everything. If there was, that red light was on the camera, it's another story. And, when I was green, I probably rushed instead of doing what I should be doing. But once I started learning, my whole theory was you turn it up a couple notches if that red light's shining, but if that red light's not shining, less is best. The people are there to be worked. They don't feel you, they see you. And that was always my theory. Always.
Wendy wants to know if you have any experiences with Gino Hernandez.
Very few. The one thing I remember about Gino, besides the problems that he had, was one night he shows up in the building and he's got two left boots, and he blames his wife for packing his bag. And I'm like, it's two left boots. Other than that, no, I didn't have a lot of interaction with Gino. I really didn't.
Did he wrestle in the two left
boots? He had no choice. He had two left boots.
Yeah, I guess you could have gone barefoot.
Yeah, might have killed the gimmick a little bit. But yeah.
It's John wants to know how was your experience with Rick Martel? You mentioned earlier that
I think Rick's one of the most underrated people in the wrestling business. Rick was great to me. Rick was one of the guys that I could ask a question, legitimate answer about business and what to do next, and or what shouldn't I do. I think Rick Martel as a babyface should be studied by people in wrestling schools. He was that good. He was and a great guy. I enjoyed sitting and talking with him, just listening, learning. He's a great guy.
He's another guy that wants nothing to do with wrestling anymore, and he doesn't like the current state of the business.
Well, Rick could probably have a place in wrestling. I mean, and I don't blame you because of the way everything has changed, and it's not the same. Guy like me, I realized that I hung on too long, and I should have walked away a year or two before I did. But you don't give up a lifetime of something just like that. You don't. But yeah, it's like that, and it's not. Some people say, "Oh, you're just bitter old guys." No, I don't begrudge people making more money than I did. Please make more money than I did, especially considering some of the risks they're taking. It's just not what we, him especially at a much higher level, what we knew. It's not.
Yeah, now they call themselves storytelling entertainers rather than wrestlers, I think.
Well, if you want to be honest, we were always an entertainer at one level. Let's just be blunt, we were. That's why people were paying tickets to come see us or buying pay-per-views. We were entertaining. But it's somehow or another, the whole move from the days like when we were talking about with Zeus, I saw some comments, Zeus scared the shit out of me as a kid. Or Zeus, I really believe Zeus was going to, even though they were younger, the fact remains that there was some believability. Are there any people out there? I don't know. that they're getting the same kind of reactions? And I don't think there are. And part of that is just because of, even though people are always a little bit smart or smarter than we gave them credit for behind, the guys behind the curtain, they were smarter than what we want to give them credit for. A good worker could make people forget during those 15 minutes, those 20 minutes, or in some cases 30, 40, whatever long, however the time limit was. A good pair of workers or four guys could make people forget that. And that's gone from what little bit I can see.
Someone's asking if you have any stories on Owen Brett or Stu Hart.
Stu, I never met Stu. I talked to him on the phone a few times. In fact, he had me booked in Calgary one time and then canceled me because the Maritimes were closing and all those boys were coming back and didn't have a spot for me. Owen was fun. Owen, you had to pay attention. Owen was always up to something. And it was just because he was enjoying life. Brett, I knew Jim better than I knew Brett. Jim was more open as far as just talking to you and BSing with you and so forth. Also knew Jim from Florida, so smaller crew. So Brett, I really don't have anything about Brett except he's just always straightforward, professional. This is what I'm going to do, and this is what we need to do, and going by. And I don't remember anything as far as some great story or he did this or he did. I don't remember that. I really don't. I guess Stu was interesting to talk to. I never met him, but I talked to him. He was interesting to talk to because you called him. He was exactly what everybody imitates. And if he called you, he was done with that conversation in like a minute. So it was fun to talk to Stu. It was fun. Owen, I liked Owen. Owen was just fun to be around.
Someone, Anarchy La Fruza or something, is asking if you ever took the Doomsday device.
Was that the Road Warriors finish?
Yes.
That's the only finish I ever refused in 6 years.
Just too dangerous.
Yeah, for me it was. Even if I was still capable of doing the backflip and landing, I just that whole upside down backwards just it didn't work for me. And they asked me. They didn't come to me and say you're going to take it, and I refuse. Blah blah blah. They came to me and asked me, "Are you comfortable with that?" No. Okay, no problem. They put me with somebody else, but that's the only finish I ever refused.
Someone's asking if you ever drank with Andre, or do you have any stories about Andre?
Too many times. Whatever reason, Andre liked me, and he would come on, boss. I called everybody boss, but he would come on, boss. And I quit drinking with Andre when I woke up in my room in the luggage cart. And we were in New Jersey somewhere. And legitimately, that's how I woke up in my room. I was in the luggage cart. That was the last time I drank with Andre.
So he would deal with the lower to the top of the card wrestlers. He didn't care. If he liked you, he'd hang out with you.
If he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't, he didn't. And it like with me, he would, come on, get on the cart with me. And I'd ride with him on the cart in the airport, him and Tim White, if he didn't have another card play, because a lot of times he played cards for money. He played cards every night, but a lot of times if he didn't have somebody to play with him for money, he's like, come on, and I'd go and play cards with him. So, yeah. But if he didn't like you, he didn't like you.
Yeah.
And I could not get him to he resented Zeus. He did not like Zeus. And I can remember a couple times, please, boss, don't kill him if you get in the ring with him. And he just doesn't know. And he'd change the subject. And I'm like, I know I didn't get through this time either. Yeah.
What kind of looks would you get for people at airports when you're riding on an airport cart with Andre?
it was just funny because it was like, what the, you know, it was like a circus came to town. I guess I don't know. Yeah, if he saw me, he'd go, get on here and be him, and Tim White with our bags. We would I don't know.
Someone's asking if you have any Mr. Fuji stories.
Not really. I mean, nothing that hasn't been told. I'm sure there's a couple of good ones out there that haven't been told because they were just that bad. Fuji was that brutal with his ribs, at least when he was younger.
Someone's asking who was the best booker you ever worked for? You've worked for a lot of the top
I
ones.
worked for a lot of them. If it wasn't Pat, it'd be Buck Robley.
What was the difference between doing enhancement work for WCW and WWE?
Not a lot. As far as the matches go, wasn't a lot. WCW, a lot of times I showed up, signed my name, and left. And with WWE, if I showed up in the town, they were putting me to work. That was one of the major differences. I've seen it where I make 10, 15 pounds for WCW. Never opened my bag, still got paid. So
was their pay similar to WWE?
Hmm?
Was their pay similar to WWE?
Yeah. As I think about it, yeah. My guarantee was right about the same. I was doing 250 or 300 when I was 300 when I was at WCW. Yeah.
Now, because you were a true independent contractor, could you work for both of them at the same time?
I did once, and I worked like 3-4 days for WCW in between some WWF shots. But WWF hadn't called me for like 2 months at this time. It was getting towards the end of my run with them anyway, and I went to whatever the next town was that they did put me in, and Tony Green pulled me off the side and said, "Yeah, we heard." And I'm like, you know, I could starve with what's been going on recently. And he's like, "Okay, don't worry about it. I'll talk." And they did. They booked me for a while, and then once again, you know, after a few months, just I had been there so long. Then there was not a whole lot more to do with me. So, and I knew it. I knew it was getting time.
And they also stopped using enhancements as much by the mid 90s. It seemed towards the Attitude Era, it completely went away, I think.
Well, that was almost necessary when Bischoff started giving away the main events on TV and the events had to follow suit. Where was a place for a guy like me? It just wasn't. So.
Thad wants to know if you think there's too many pay-per-views nowadays because it's hard to build up to an angle like they did with the Zeus storylines, for instance, in the short period of time.
Yep, entirely too many. I know why they do it. And if I was in charge of the bookkeeping, I'd probably do the same thing. But from a fan's standpoint, yeah, well, easily.
Eddie, watching on Facebook, wants to know how long you did the Doink gimmick for.
Too long. About 10, 11 years.
What do you think about so many people now do the Doink gimmick? Like, it doesn't even have to be one of the WWE Doinks. There's all these independent shows that advertise Doink, and it can be talentless, untrained wrestlers in a clown suit.
What are you going to do? Exactly what could you do? More power to them if it's making them some money. As far as protecting the gimmick, nobody protects a gimmick anymore anyway. So that part, that old mentality of not protecting the gimmick, if I still lived and breathed business, I'd say that hurts. If I'm still trying to make a living, it would be really bad because that's places I might be able to go. But yeah, more power to them. Go for it. If it's going to make you some money, go for it.
What was your favorite town to work in for WWE?
Favorite? Oh, I don't know. Lord. I don't know if I had a favorite. I know when I got to make Madison Square Garden, that was huge in my world. Yeah.
That was back, I guess, when they did TV tapings there too.
Yeah. In my first match in the Madison Square Garden, I was nervous as shit. I mean, I about passed out. And it shows in the match, the first few minutes of the match. And then I calmed down. But just the idea that you're in the garden, that's major to a kid that came from nowhere.
John Paglassi wants to know, what was your favorite finishing move to take?
Oh, to take anything that didn't hurt. I didn't really care. I really didn't, because the majority of those guys up there would take care of you. There was always a little handful that, but man, that's hard to say what was a favorite move to take. It's, I guess, ones that actually looked realistic. At least you were beat.
1 minute plus tribute remembers you in a match with two others against One Man Gang when he was on top of all three of you. He asked you, it really hurt.
I don't remember the match. I don't remember the match. Gang could hurt you if you were away from it a little bit. Not because he wanted to, because it was just a bad word. He couldn't see. So it's entirely possible he sputted me. But other than that, Gang was a sweetheart to work with.
Yeah, we recently did a 3.5-hour interview on here, and he seems like a really nice guy. But
he's a sweetheart.
Someone's asking if you have any Harley race stories.
Oh, there's a few. Lord. The first time I ever got scared in a vehicle Harley was driving. It was the only time I just knew the first time I just knew I was going to die. Harley didn't know speed limit. And he wasn't afraid to get in Terry Garvin's bag, because Terry Garvin was running the Kansas City office in those days. And get in Terry Garvin's bag, have Terry pour him a little drink, he'd have a little drink, and then we'd be doing 110. And that's that. And I don't think people realize how over Harley was in Kansas City, St. Louis, that region. He couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. And so there would always be an idiot that would try him. And it never worked out well for the idiot. So. But yeah, the first time I rode with Harley is the first time in the business I just knew I was going to die.
Yeah, and he had been in a few like near fatal car accidents too. I think he actually killed his first wife in one of them.
There was, the wife and the child was a collision with the train, and I don't know how the story works, but it was a car wreck with a train is all I really know.
What was so tough about him? Because you always hear him as one of the top 5 toughest. Did he just have a hard punch?
Well, he had that hand that was all metal from the train wreck that we just talked about. He had bone. What would have been bones were metal pieces in his hand and in at least one of his legs. And it's like he would say, if I hit you with the left and you don't go down, I'm worried, because I had metal in that hand. And Harley just wasn't scared. You couldn't scare Harley.
Now, Sid, Vader, and the Steiner brothers were all known for being really rough on enhancement talent. Did you ever get in the ring with any of those guys?
Never Vader. Sid and I got along fine, so I can't speak to what he was with other guys. The Steiners were night and day in the same match. Rick was not rough with anybody. Scott was, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just he didn't care, or he was another one of those that didn't know how strong he was, or what. But you could literally have your back turned, and if they tagged, you knew which one was in the ring just by the way they grabbed you.
Donnie Brasco wants to know if you ever worked with Jesse Ventura. I know he commentated your matches.
Quite a few, but he was sick before I got up there.
Someone's asking if there was ever any talk of having you on Piper's Pit.
No, the Piper's Pit had pretty much passed on by the time I got up there, too. By then, it was Jake was doing his Snake Pit. And right after that was Beefcake and the Barber Shop. I don't remember being on too many shows with the Pipers. In fact, when I first got up there, Piper had just left. So, yeah, I don't remember being in any position or anything like that.
Ken, terminated by DQ, wants to know who back in the 80s would you have wanted to manage you in WWE?
Oh, Heenan. I love Jimmy, but Heenan, it was like, how do you fail with Heenan? If you've got any, like I said earlier, when we were talking about, giving a guy like Steve the gimmick, from the standpoint of the wrestling business, why not? From the standpoint of the fans, I know why it doesn't work. But if you've got any kind of steam behind you, he's taking you to the next level.
Someone's asking if you ever body slam Ric Flair off the top rope.
Once in Florida, we worked in Florida before I got to that, and we actually had to have a little competitive match because we had to go more than 3 minutes. So yeah, we did that. Yeah, it was just standard Flair. That was what he did.
Is it true he would be more giving in the matches against enhancement talent than a lot of wrestlers?
Yeah, because he came from the old school that if I don't beat somebody, I beat nobody, and that doesn't do me any good.
How would you rate Flair as far as being easy to work with? Because I've heard so many people say it's like a night off. You just kind of follow him and he magically takes you through an amazing match.
Yeah, I didn't have to do the 30 or 45 minutes with him, but the matches that I did, whether they were 2 or 15, that's exactly what it was. Just listen.
KCB wants to know what would happen in WWE if someone was unprofessional taking liberties with an enhancement talent. Would Vince do anything about it?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Whatever might take place behind the scenes, I don't know. I know that some of the agents would chew their asses. They obviously hurt a guy because they weren't paying attention. The agents would chew their ass right then and there. That may have been the end of it. I don't know. I don't know what happened behind the scenes.
Eric wants to know, how was your experiences with Dick Murdoch?
I loved him. The little one that was in here earlier, his middle name's Murdoch. I know all the stories. I know all the baggage that comes with Murdoch. But as far as the way Murdoch treated me, I loved him. It was great as far as teaching me and helping me learn and that sort of thing.
He was in Grunt the Wrestling movie, so
Was
maybe you could watch it for that reason.
I might have to now.
I heard he was one of the toughest ever, too, of course.
Oh, he was no one. He just wasn't scared. And that makes a man tough, regardless of what anybody wants to try to say. If they're not scared, they already have an advantage. And Murdoch was no one. You couldn't scare him. Him, Harley, Funk, they didn't care. And I've seen him. We had shipwreck loose in the building here or there when we were working in the South. I've seen him clip people with punches that didn't travel 6 inches and they were unconscious. So yeah, he was rough.
Would you have you ever wrestled Terry Funk?
No, that's one of the few that I missed. And I kind of regret it. I can't go back now, but I would have loved to have wrestled with Funk.
Well, you never know with Terry. Maybe it's you that's fully retired.
Well, it would be an 80-year-old man and a 60-year-old man, so I don't think that would work real well, but you never know.
There's been a few fans on here that have wanted to know about the missing link, one of the Canadian.
I didn't know him.
Did you ever wrestle Adrian Adonis? Someone's asking.
No, I didn't ever work with him. He was here in San Antonio when they did the World Championship thing with him when I was breaking in. So I was like a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid, and I was just sitting in the corner and watching. So I didn't have any interaction with him, but he was here. And they were pushing him hard before he went from here to, I guess that's when he went up to Vince.
Ryan wants to know, do you have a copy of your WWE Dark Match win over Joe Cruz from Wrestling Challenge in Toledo?
No. I'm not a big collector of my stuff, but that's one I would love to have. Just to say, look, I went 1 in 500, but there's the one. I don't have it.
Daniel wants to know if you have any Iron Sheik stories.
Not anything I have nothing that could top it, which we've already heard now.
Were you making a living off of TV matches? John Flower wants to know.
Well, I wasn't working just the TV. When I was working just the TV, that wasn't a living. But you had a base to make a living because then you could go work other places and you could make a living. When I was working even just 2 or 3 shows a week along with the TV, easily.
You're not going to do this, but somebody wants you to take your shirt off and flex.
No, those days are over. Those days are long gone.
Eddie remembers you from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Mm-hmm. I've been in Corpus a few times, yeah.
What was your favorite territory to work? I know you did the Memphis territory for a while, not known for its great payoffs.
Well, we were paid off horribly then. That's why I kind of like got surprised when I started hearing the stories. But then I realized, Jared, businessman, nobody had any options. When I was there, we were getting paid much more than what I heard later. As far as favorite territory, home's always great. You always love home, Southwest. I like Florida. Yeah, I like Florida. I had a part. Even though Kansas City was lower on the totem pole for a lot of people, I had a soft spot for it because it was my first break outside of San Antonio. So I always liked it there. Those have been my favorites.
There's been a bunch of people asking on here, speaking of San Antonio, about Shawn Michaels, if you had any dealings with him over the years.
Yeah, I know Shawn. I've known Shawn since before he started. I haven't seen him in years. Last time I saw him was Lance Cage's funeral. In fact, I think he's living in Florida now. But we were around each other through the first part of the fence run, the Rockers coming in and so forth. And then I've been around him a little bit since then. But yeah, I know Shawn.
Was he ever rude with you, or was he pretty good because he was known to go through that one period there where he was a bit of a dick?
That was right after the period where he really got bad, and I heard all the stories from people that I trust, and I had already left. And then when he came home with the back injury and all that fun stuff, and he stayed home for a couple of years, and he had to school and so forth and so on, we just picked up like we hadn't. Like we've been around each other for years. I didn't have any of that with him. People that I've heard tell the stories, I trust them. I believe it. I can see, especially when he would get on the pills. He wasn't alone. He wasn't the only one like that. That it would just change. Quite a few guys are like that.
Haku's a very popular subject on this channel. Do you have any stories or experiences with him?
Oh, I would ride with him some. He's another one that when it started with him, you get scared quick. I think most of the good ones have been told. Like when he stripped the guy naked in the bar, when he was holding him up by the throat.
I didn't hear about stripping a guy naked.
Yeah, some guy called him the N-word. I forget where we were at. Terry Taylor, I think, was there. I wasn't alone. It wasn't just me and Hawk. I think it was Terry Taylor. And he stopped and he's like, he looked at me and he said, "Did he just say what I think he said?" I always call him King. I was like, "King, I don't know." Because I didn't hear it. And Haku asked him, just straight up asked the guy. Yeah, and called him again. The guy was, Haku's what, 6'1" or so, and the guy was probably about 5'8". Haku picked him up by the throat, one hand, paintbrushes him, just strips him to his clothes as he's paintbrushing him, and then drops him. And I'm like, dear God, remind me to never make you mad. And I was holding the door for him. Let's go.
People seem to love calling him the N-word, even though he's Samoan.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Yeah, what are you drinking to make you this ignorant? Or did you already just start that way? It was one of those kind of things. What were you thinking?
And I've heard he was very underrated in the ring. I don't know if he ever got in there.
Him and Barr both were great. I think part of the reason they didn't get the pushes they deserved was people were scared to put belts on them because what if they didn't want to drop them? I honestly believe that because they were both great in the ring and could get over.
And of course, great looks as well.
Hmm?
Guardian of Chaos is asking, how was the Northeast Territory, New York, Boston, Hartford, Providence, etc.? Not each one, but maybe in general.
I enjoyed myself up there unless it was winter. I hate snow. That's why I live in South Texas. Um, the fans were they were a different breed, even just in different sections of the Northeast. You had places like Boston where the crowd would be rough, and then you just go down the road to another town like New Haven or something like that, and they were more traditional. You go to a place like Philadelphia, and the waitresses are stabbing each other and stuff. All those towns were different, but I enjoyed it up there. It was a learning experience.
What was the most dangerous crowd you ever worked in front of?
It would have been in the States. Let's see. I've been stabbed in Cape Town. Uh, I've had them set the building on fire in Singapore. So just about anywhere that had a large Hindu Indian population, it's really serious some nights.
Do you ever think it'll go back to that where heels will have that kind of heat?
People know it's the office. People already, the heels don't have the heat they used to have. Baby faces don't have the, outside of a few, they don't have the love they used to have because they know everything is people know everything is coming from the office. So, no.
I don't think there's anybody with heel heat these days because all the heels have fans.
That's
and
part of it.
They're goofy. Almost all of them are goofy. Even Brock Lesnar, he might be the least goofy one, but he's so beloved by fans because he's one of the few ones that actually look like he could kick your ass.
Yeah, some of that's society too. Some of it has nothing to do with, like I just said. At the end of the day, people know it's all coming from the office, but some of that's just society. They want to cheer the bad guy. They want to be the bad guy.
Rob Summers wants to tell you hi. He says he wrestled you in 2004, Texas State University. You DDT'd him through a surfboard and broke it.
Yeah, we were like the quad. I remember that now. Paul London helped set that up.
Someone's asking if you ever worked for Herb Abrams. What was that like?
I didn't know any of the craziness that was going on until the end because it was one of those. For me, it was just another town, another payday. I show up, do whatever was asked of me, and at the time, I thought, Herb was just a real friendly, happy guy. I didn't realize why he was always smiling. And then when it was all said and done, I'm like, no wonder he had a permanent smile. But, when you start hearing some of the stories, it was like, wow, I'm kind of glad I did just show up and then leave.
No pay issues with you, I guess, then.
Hmm?
There was no pay issues with you, I guess.
No, I wasn't there at the very end either. I worked like 5, 6, 7 times for him when he was just getting started good, and my money was there.
Joseph wants to know who are some of the wrestlers that were intimidating backstage. You mentioned Dynamite Kid already.
Intimidating. I don't remember anything intimidating. I really don't. We were there doing our jobs.
Francisco wants to know memories of your match with Chip Minton in WCW.
I hope you get me fired from WCW. Or not fired, but as I was working my way into a retainer contract, which a lot of the boys had, and that would help get me fired.
What was that?
It was a long story short. I laid out a match for him that had to go like 5, 6 minutes, and I saw it on YouTube the other day. My son found it, my oldest, and it's pretty much what I remember. I need him to get up. He won't get up. He's blown up. He won't get up. So I'm not going to kill their TV time, and I stayed on him, and he got up. We did the finish. I finally got enough wind back to do the finish. And I told him, don't try to do everything at once, but he did, and then he's blown up. We still got time. So anyway, I'm not killing the time. We're not gonna have dead air. I stay on him. So as I'm walking back, I know I'm in trouble because I was just stomped for 3 minutes on one of the power plant guys. And as I'm coming out of the building there in Orlando, Pee Wee Anderson, he's standing at the production trailer and he yells at me, Arn wants to see you. I'm like, I know this is coming. I knew it was coming. So I go in there and I listen to Arn for a few minutes, and I'm like, I tell him the truth. I laid it out, and well, that's why we had you. I said, but the guy's so strong, I can't stop him. I had to go to the floor to stop him because he was a natural, big guy, the bobsled or whatever he did. And he's like, well, we had you out there to do this and this, and I said, Arn, you can lead him to water. And we've got so much invested in him. And I said, well, then that's when I snapped. One of the few times I've ever snapped at anybody in any office. And I really didn't snap, but I mean, it was just, when I say snap, talk back, pop off. And I'm like, well, here's a novel idea. Give me his contract. And I got up and I left. And that retainer contract that was supposed to be in the mail never showed up.
A few people have asked, speaking of Anderson, if you've ever wrestled Arn Anderson.
Yeah, great hand. Oh my God, he's one of those that you don't realize how good he is until you're actually in it with him.
Someone's asking on here if you have any Jesse Barr stories.
Not really. I mean, I knew him from Florida. We were around each other in Florida, but no, not really. I mean, he went his way, I went mine.
Rec 46 is asking if you could tell us anything else from your world-class days. Maybe did you ever meet Bruiser Brody in there or anything?
Yeah, I knew Brody well. Brody and I got along well. In fact, he's the one that booked me to Israel when I went to Israel. He booked me in world class when he was booked in world class. We had a conversation right before he died. He was thinking about trying to run some towns down here around San Antonio. And that same week, I was going to Singapore. He was going down to Puerto Rico. And we know what happened then. And we got along real well. Really did. He was another guy that helped me a lot.
We hear about how popular world class was in Israel. Are the stories true? I mean, I just heard one of the Von Erichs talking about that the other day.
Yeah, but I made one of the last trips over there, and they were still, in Dallas, business was fading a little bit. In Israel, they were still, if it's 5,000 people, it was 5,000 people in the building. I mean, if it could seat 5,000, it would be 5,000. We went to Haifa. Haifa was an outdoor stadium, and it was like 10,000 people there. And they mobbed Lance. I thought they were going to kill Lance, just trying to touch him and get an autograph and so forth. Yeah, it was crazy.
So you can confirm that Lance Von Erich was over because history likes to rewrite that he wasn't.
Lance carried world class for months. When Kerry couldn't work, Mike couldn't work and then dies. Kevin could, but Kevin couldn't stay straight. Lance sometimes was working 2 and 3 shows and 2 and 3 matches a show because he was the only Von Erich on the card. That's probably the reason he left. It got to be too much. But yeah, Lance was over. That's the reason whenever I was helping both places, I'd pick up the phone and, hey, can you make it with me?
Someone's asking on here any stories about the Von Erichs and the groupies that were following.
No, I was one of those guys that if I did anything that I shouldn't be doing, I kept it to myself and I stayed away from yours as much as I could because I didn't want to be the guy in the cuffs.
Do you think that the Von Erichs made a mistake bad-mouthing Lance after and saying he wasn't a Von Erich because nobody really knew, and then they kind of exposed themselves?
Expose themselves, exactly. A horrible move. I mean, what are we going to do now? But it was a horrible move. Just say he was hurt. Just, say he didn't have the Von Erich heart or whatever, and let him go. But, they exposed themselves.
Robert wants to know the biggest asshole in wrestling, in your opinion.
Oh man, oh, there's a few in contention for that. Oh, I realized I was in the business a long time too. I don't know. I don't. It's not because I don't want to say. I just don't know. There's a couple that I just don't like because of the way things went down between us. But just because I think they're an asshole doesn't mean they were a complete asshole. I don't know. I really don't. Abby was probably, as far as people a name people know, he's probably him or Chavo Senior. Probably the two worst.
Well, if you mean Abdullah the Butcher, I could tell you he is one of the biggest assholes in wrestling.
He was one of the few times I ever almost got in a locker room fight. I mean, I've been in one locker room fight in 30 years, and it only came close like only two other times in all those years, and Abby was one of them. So you're not alone.
What was that over?
Just pushing people around and being Abdullah, and just I had gotten finally fed up with it.
Well, you'll be happy to know he's fairly in a lot of trouble these days. So
and it's one of those things that doesn't bother me in the least. It really does. Just the way he treated people. Just in general, the way he treated folks.
Who was the one guy you were in a locker room fight with?
Jerry Estrada down in Monterrey, Mexico.
I guess that's something that happened in the ring that carried to the back.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was almost, I don't want to say deathly ill, but I was sick. I had Montezuma's revenge, and I told him in the back, I'm here, but please, don't hit me in the gut, don't kick me in the gut. And he went out of his way too. So when I walked in the back, it just broke loose. I felt bad about it later, but at that moment, I didn't. That's how hot I was. It was what it was.
We have an Irishman on here asking if you're Irish American.
No, well, I might be. My grandparents on my dad's side were orphans, so I might be. But as far as like what I do know, no.
Someone's checking in from the UK asking how you felt having your name changed to Dale, which you already covered. So we don't.
Yeah, I really didn't care. My thing was, as long as my name was right on my check, that was my only real concern. Is my name was right on my check.
Now, we don't have to go into this because I know you were friends with Terry Garvin, but a bunch of people have commented your opinion on the big scandal with Phillips, Patterson, and Garvin.
I was disappointed because I had never seen anything of that nature out of Terry. That doesn't mean that it wasn't happening. I think Terry, part of what happens with Terry was he's involved, but somebody had to go down hard, and so it was Terry. I have nothing but good things to say about the man as far as the way he dealt with me business-wise and some of the opportunities he helped get for me and so forth. I have nothing but good things to say about it. It's one of those things where you were just completely disappointed when you heard about it. Just, oh my God, why?
Andy Anderson wants to know your opinion of David Schultz.
I don't know him. Never crossed paths with him.
Now, you do have a couple of books out, an initial release, and then I think you have a follow-up.
I wrote a new one. The first one, I was in kind of a dark time, and it shows. I wrote a new one here a couple years ago, and it's just my life story, some viewpoints on wrestling from a guy that I was never. I don't confuse myself with, I was a star. I wasn't, but I stayed busy. I kept working. I found ways to keep working, and in that perspective, like it says, journal or journeyman, and that's what it was. I go wherever I needed to go, do whatever needed to be done.
So where can people order that if they want to pick it up?
Mm-hmm. I even have a few copies around the house I could sign and send. I can be found on Facebook. I can be found on Twitter. So.
Where exactly is it? Just Dusty Wolf if people want to look you up?
As far as Facebook goes, yeah, then it's Rancho Wolf on Twitter.
Rancho Wolf, okay.
Rancho Wolf on Twitter.
A couple people have asked about your initial training for wrestling under Ken. How was that?
It would, I probably had it a little easier than I should have because Ken and I were friends. Still had it rough. And after about 6 months, I went with him down to the junction to see if we could start working out in the ring because it was the only ring in town. They put me in the ring that night on TV. And then Joe Blanchard put me with Don Carson and Ken to help bring me along further. So I had it easier than some of the guys. I'm not going to lie. It was still tough.
Do you have any advice for wrestlers out there watching this? Because you worked with the best, pretty much all of the best.
I don't know why anybody would try today, honestly, unless you've got a connection. But if you're going to try, it's your life. There's no other way around it. If you're going to make the attempt, it's your life. Otherwise, don't, because all you do is get in the way of those that really might be able to do something.
You play both a baby face and a heel. Did you have any preference?
Heel's much easier. Much easier.
Any secrets for being a heel you could share with us?
I learned from Johnny Valentine, and Piper, and Murdoch, that sometimes the best thing to do is stop and let the people come to you, and as far as being a heel. And that was probably the best. And even though with Johnny, I didn't get a lot of what you call advice, and Piper was from observing, but it was the best. Well, let's call it advice, or I stole it, however you want to put it. That was the easiest thing to do. You're working them, so there's ways to do it without doing anything but standing still.
Anarchy wants to know if you ever worked with Eric Embry. I think there was some heat at one point with you two.
Yeah, I didn't even know about it. I didn't even know it. Kenny Timms had been teaming with Embry down here, and Kenny was ready to leave. Eric was trying to buy the office down here, and as far as I knew, the split was kind of amicable. It was just, I'm not moving, and you want to. So anyway, I went off with Kenny to Memphis and Florida, a couple other places. And it turns out I had all kinds of heat with Eric because of that.
Have you seen him since? I know he pretty much has dropped off the radar in recent years.
I haven't seen Eric, 30 years.
And finally, for wrestling promoters watching this, you've been around, you've seen what works and what doesn't. If a wrestling promotion, maybe an indie promotion, wanted to have some success, what kind of advice would you give them as far as?
Lord, I don't know anymore because the world around us has changed. The one thing I would do is I would stay out of the big towns, big cities, medium-sized towns, even smaller towns. Keep your overhead low, but take care of your talent. As you can, because if you take care of your talent, they'll take care of you. And then you've got to use that internet. You've got to use that social media, and not just that. You got to have some boots on the ground too. So I don't know how you make money today. I don't. Outside of just like I say, stay out of places that are going to cost you a ton of money, and take care of your talent.
Ronaldo is asking if you ever worked with Ivan Putski in San Antonio.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Why do you think his son Scott never really made it? Because he seemed like he had potential.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if that's one of those things where he was paying for the sins of the father or what. I don't know.
Sins of the father? I didn't know that Ivan had any.
I didn't have the greatest reputation among the old timers. The guys that he made money with, but they were I always could sit down and have a good conversation with him, but then you would talk to some of the other older guys, and they weren't real fond of Ivan. Not all of them.
Someone's asking if you keep in touch with anyone from the WWE.
On rare occasion, I'll talk to like Gang or I'll talk to Honky Tonk. That's about it. Tito. Every once in a great while, I'll give me like three sentences back and forth with Tito, and that's about it.
Honky Tonk is another guy that wants nothing to do with the business anymore.
You know, that's one of the guys that I loved him when I loved being around him, even when other people were like, you get mad at him. And he was another one that I'm a big one on that. If you don't want the opinion, don't ask the question. And Honky Tonk was definitely in that category. I like that.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak.
Sure. I appreciate you having me.
Were you surprised when Zeus passed away, by the way?
Yeah, I was shocked because I had continually told myself that even though we were running in different circles, eventually one day when we could go back to doing signings, etc., that eventually one day I would break down and go do one that he was at so I could at least say hello to him again. You know, I just kept lying to myself. I'll see him again. And then when I turned the computer on that day and it was like one of the first things I saw, I'm like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah, he was only, what, in his early 60s or just
62, something like that. Yeah, he's only a couple years older than I am.
He's still looking. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to say to the fans. I know the fans really enjoyed this because
I'm glad.
they're very active in the comments.
I couldn't keep up with the comments if I tried. My ADD wouldn't let me. I'm glad. I appreciate it. And anything like this, that you reach out and talk to people a little bit, I think it's great. Like I said, I don't live in the business anymore. I don't. I enjoy talking about it whenever it's time, and I appreciate the fans, like the folks that remember it, especially. You know, those are. I enjoy that. I really do.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it,